This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
China's crude oil imports jumped 21% in March from a low base of comparison a year earlier as refiners ramped up operation amid robust fuel demand post-COVID-19, though purchases slowed ahead of the maintenance season. The world's top crude oil buyer imported 49.66 million tons last month, equivalent to 11.69 million barrels per day. BPD data from the General Administration of Customs showed on Tuesday. March imports were down from 11.73 million barrels of oil per day in February.
U.S. oil output from 7 major shale formations is expected to rise for a third straight month, climbing by about 13,000 barrels per day, BPD, in May to 7.61 million barrels of oil per day, the U.S. Energy Information Administration said on Monday. The biggest increase is set to come from the Permian, the top producing basin in the country, where output is expected to rise by 52,000 barrels of oil per day to about 4.47 million barrels of oil per day, the highest since April 2020, the AIA said in a monthly forecast. Output from other top-producing basins such as the Bakken and Eagle Ford are expected to slide by 12,000 barrels of oil per day and 9,000 barrels of oil per day, respectively.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Russia has agreed to make changes to a tax on fuel from May 1, Deputy Finance Minister Alexei Sazonov said on Tuesday, in order to curb domestic fuel prices from rising and pay more compensation to the companies for restraining prices. Rising value of gasoline is a sensitive issue for the authorities, who have struggled to stick to their pledges to cap it at the current rate of inflation. Sazonov also told reporters that the tax formula is still under discussion, but the changes are likely to be partially compensated via an increase in the mineral extraction tax. Under the current tax system, the state compensates companies for keeping socially sensitive fuel prices stable if oil prices are high, preventing exports of extra barrels to much more lucrative global markets.
Oil prices rose about 1% on Tuesday on strong Chinese import data, but the rally was capped by concerns that pauses on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine could delay economic recovery and limit oil demand growth. Brent crude oil futures were up 69 cents, or 1%, at $63.97 a barrel by 12:10 p.m. Eastern Time, 16:10 GMT, while U.S. crude oil futures gained 70 cents, or 1.2%, to $60.39 a barrel. Both contracts have recorded changes of less than 1% for 4 straight sessions. We've been trading in a range, and need clear demand data and direction on U.S. inventories to break out of this trough, said Phil Flynn, senior analyst at Price Futures Group in Chicago. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. China's March copper imports rose 25% from a year earlier, customs data showed on Tuesday, amid increasing demand for the metal and as arrivals climbed after logistics issues were resolved. Arrivals of unwrought copper and products totaled 552,317 tons last month, the General Administration of Customs said. That was up from 441,926 tons in March 2020, when China's economy was starting to recover from the coronavirus pandemic, and up 34.7% from a 13-month low of 410,040 tons in February.
Japan's crude steel output is forecast to rise 28.3% in the April to June quarter from a year earlier to 23.24 million tons, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI, said on Tuesday. Demand for steel products, including those for exports, is forecast to increase 20.6% to 20.61 million tons in April to June versus a year earlier, the ministry also said, citing an industry survey. Exports are forecast to rise 21.1%, the ministry said.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
China imported 1.02 million tons of meat in March, customs data showed on Tuesday, the highest monthly volume since at least January 2020, as the world's biggest meat buyer continued to stock up to fill shortages at home. Imports rose 11.4% from 919,000 tons in March 2020, the data showed, even after local pork prices fell sharply since the start of the year. China's General Administration of Customs started publishing data for combined meat imports last year. It comes as China's output of pork, its staple meat, continues to be affected by the deadly hog disease African swine fever, which reached the country in 2018.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.